In this video, I'm going to talk about final keyword in Java. Now, before we start to understand final with respect to Java, let us understand the meaning of word final itself. So let me go to Google and ask Google what is the meaning of final. So I'll type here, what is meaning of final? So let's see what it says. So Google says that it means something which is ultimate, eventual, or endmost. So what it means is something which is final or which is ultimate or which cannot be modified, right? Now that is the English meaning of word final. Let's try to understand it with respect to Java. So there are three places where you can make use of the final keyword. So let me bring up my OneNote here. So final can be, we can have a final variable in Java. We can have final method in Java, and we can also have a final class in Java. Now let's try to understand them one by one with an example. So I will launch my Eclipse to explain the concept with the help of code. So let me bring up my Eclipse here. Okay, so this is my Eclipse and let me write a small program to explain the concept of final. So let me close all the existing files which I have. I will go to this project. I will go to src main Java, and here under the package com c2d oops, I'll create a class and I'll call it some class, let's say understanding final, and in that we'll write code to understand the concept of final variable. So let me go ahead and create my class. So I'll call it understanding final, understanding final. Okay, now let me take a practical example rather than creating the final inside understanding final. I'll create a class called car. So let me create that class class, and I'll open and close the bracket, and here I'll create some string strng and a color equal to, let's say I give it red color. Also I create one method inside this particular class, and I'm going to call it let's say I give it a name called change color. So I'll say public void change color, open bracket, close bracket, and inside this I'll say color is equals to, let's say, blue. Now what I'm going to do is inside this class of mine, which is understanding final, I will create I'll create a main first, main, and inside the main I'll create instance of this class called car. So I'll say car c equal to new of car. Now if I first of all display the value of color with the instance of c, so if I say sysout of c dot color, I'm sure you know that we'll get the output as red. So let me run this program, run as Java application. So on running this program, I get the expected output as red color. Now let me go ahead and call the method which is change color. So I will say c dot change color, and now if I again try to display the value of color, this time I'll get the color as blue because the value has been modified in line number 16, right? So this is something which we already know of. Now let me go ahead and create a variable which I will create as a final variable. Now if you think about it practically, if you have a red color car, maybe you can repaint it and change the color to blue later on in future if you want to. But there is an attribute of a car which cannot be modified at any point of time. So let me create a variable which I'll call it as final variable. So I'll say final fuel capacity capacity, and I'll make it, let's say, 20. Now I'll also make this variable as integer data type. Now as you will see that I have made this variable as final. Now, if a variable is final in no capacity or at no point of time, you can make any change to the value of that. So I cannot go and say fuel capacity is equals to 25, for example. If I try to do that, it gives a compile time error here, as you can see in line number 18. So if I hover my mouse on the error, you will see that it says final field car dot fuel capacity cannot be assigned. What it means is that because I have defined fuel capacity as a final variable, I cannot change the value of that particular final variable. Another important point to be noted about final variable is that, so first of all, let me comment this because it is giving compile time error. So now coming back to another key point or key concept about final variable is that when you are declaring a final variable, like here in the line number 14, let's say you don't assign a value to it. So let me remove the value. So it says, what does it say? It says the blank final field fuel capacity may not have been initialized. It means that if you create a final variable, you have to make sure that you also assign some default or an initial value to it, right? So I have to give it some value. In this case, I have given it a value of 20. Now, if it is a non-final variable, let's say string color, I can choose to make it as a value without, as a variable without any value. So this is perfectly fine. Whereas in the case of final variable, I have to give it some value when I'm initializing or when I'm declaring that particular variable. So the conclusion is that a final variable, when it is being declared, it also has to be initialized with some value. So that is pretty much about final variable. Now let's move on to the next concept, which is a final method. Okay, so what is a final method? As the name suggests, if a method is a final method, it cannot be overridden. Why it cannot be overridden? Because it is final or it is complete. Now, what is meant by overriding? Overriding means that in the class or in a subclass which inherits a class called car, you can override that method. But if you have declared that method as a final method, then you cannot override it. So let me explain that with an example to you. So let me go ahead and create one more method here, and I'm going to call that method as public void max speed, for example. So this is my method. Now what I'll do is I'll sys out here and say anything I want to. So in this case, I'm going to make it as max speed here. So this is max speed. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another class called class, I'll call it BMW, which extends car class. Now if I make this method as final method, final, okay, if I make this method as final variable, then I cannot override this method. So let me try to override this method. Let's see what is the error it is giving if I try to override it. So if I hover my mouse on line number 27, it says cannot override final method from the car. So as I just explained to you, that if a method is a final method in a given class, then any subclass, which in this case is a BMW, if it extends that another class which is a car class, then you cannot override a final method. In case I go ahead and remove this particular variable, then this compile time error will be gone, as you will see. Why? Because now since it is not a final method, you can feel free to override this method. I mean, I believe you will understand, and it makes pretty much good sense that as the name suggests, that if a method is already final, meaning that it is complete, there is no chance of it being overridden or getting modified or upgraded or downgraded, or rather overridden in the terms of Java, by a class which extends the class called car here. So the conclusion is that a subclass which extends another class cannot override a final method. So that's about the final method in Java. Now let's look at a final class. Now, before we look at the final class, let me go ahead and comment this to remove my compile time error or delete it, for example. So I have deleted and my error is gone. Now, in this program, as you will see that I have a class BMW which extends a car. Now, what if I make the class as final? If a class itself is final, it means that it cannot be inherited. It also means in simple terms that a class is final and no class which is trying to extend that class can enhance or upgrade or add new feature to it or new attribute to it or new methods to it. So a class, if it is defined as a final class, then it cannot be inherited. So let me try to make this car class as So let me try to make this car class as final. So I'll put a keyword final here, final. Now you will see that it starts to give a compile time error at line number 26 here. So it says that type BMW cannot subclass the final class car. So the conclusion is that if you have a final class, no other class can extend that particular class. So that is pretty much about the final concept in Java. So in order to summarize it, we have a final variable which cannot be modified once it is assigned a value. We have a final method which cannot be overridden by a subclass, and we have a final class which cannot be inherited by a subclass. You can find the code for this video which I have just explained to you from this following link. This is my Bitbucket account. So I'm also sharing this particular link in my comment section below the video. So for example, if you'll go to a video here at the bottom and in the comment section, so for example, this is a video you are looking at. Here below in the comment section, you can find, so there will be a comment section here where you can find the link for this particular code that I have just explained to you. That's all I had to discuss about the final keyword in this particular video. Thank you so much for your time.